Well, he was tweeting that it might be another Caro-Kann, but I say that and he's swapped it straight away with the Queen's Pawn opening because he got in a bit of trouble, Anish, with the white pieces yesterday when he played the King's Pawn move. So this is why he's going for something different. And we already see a bit of an unorthodox move there with the white knight coming in front of the Queen, because that blocks the bishop in, it blocks the Queen in. So it's a little bit strange, that move.
It definitely is a little bit strange, but it does have a purpose, and the purpose is simply, you know, if white is allowed to, they are going to put another pawn in the centre, the e-pawn. It's going to march 2 squares forward. And maybe the game will develop into something a bit more similar to another opening that we kind of call the modern or the perk.
Well, actually, I was watching a video, a Howell's how-to video yesterday called Opening Traps. Yes. And I think actually I remember it was something about putting the knight in that place, David.
Okay.
That somehow was an opening trap?
Possibly, I think, in a slightly different opening. But yeah, sometimes putting your knights on squares that do block in your pieces, it can end very badly. So here, I don't think that's the case. But
it's a bit of a surprise for me, actually, this next move.
Yeah, but have you not played this yourself, Jovanka?
I have, and I had lost absolutely every single game I played. I did not like it. It was too passive for me. And yeah, I had to make some changes. So I'm very curious to see what Anish has, brought to this particular variation, because I felt very uncomfortable here with the white pieces.
I remember one game, Norwegian League 2020.
Yeah, you don't need to go into that.
Bad memories.
It is bad memories, because I lost every single game that weekend. So,
Simon, what do you think of this last move? I know you're a big supporter of pushing Harry the H-pawn when your opponents kind of created this formation. Aryan's done basically a mirror image, push the A-pawn.
Yeah, it's always, nearly always a good idea when your opponent goes to fianchetto to try and attack that structure. But I think kind of what's more interesting is the approach that Anish has taken to this game. He's clearly going for a non-theoretical opening, which I think is a little bit of a surprise, because we would assume that his openings are probably better than his second, because, you know, so why go for an opening which is really not that theoretical? And what I mean by that, an opening where you don't really have to memorise the moves so much. It's more about just play. This is more your style, David, I'd say. This is more like you don't have to memorise the moves. It's not that important. You just got to know where the pieces go, and planning is so much more important, because it's not strictly like the tempo of the game is not critical as such. So that's quite interesting, I think. I didn't expect that from Anish to go for that style of play.
Yeah, I'm very surprised as well, because one of his biggest weapons, especially with white, they are his openings, Anish. And he's basically saying, no, I don't really worry. I'm not really kind of fussed about trying to get an advantage. I'm just getting a position. And he's trying to keep all the pawns, all the pieces on the board. No exchanges yet. And we might well see Tari just think a bit longer. He's the first one to try and pause now and come up with a plan, as Simon mentioned. It's just about choosing where the pieces go. It's not completely clear. There's just so much choice for black. Black's light square bishop, black's knight, both asleep. They can come out now, but where do you put them? What's the long-term goal in the middle game? It's those types of questions. It's not about surviving the opening anymore. So interesting strategic choice. Maybe Anish just trying to get in Tari's head. Bit of a surprise, and he's the first one to launch that surprise, which is normally a good thing.
Yeah, definitely, but I don't approve of this choice by Anish, just because I've got such bad memories with it. But it's not entirely clear for black, but it's also, in my experience, not entirely clear for white either, because there are no natural pawn breaks. Yes, you could perhaps push the C pawn forward, but then you concede some squares. And as we know in chess, squares are currency. You know, the more squares you give, the more options you give to your opponent.
So, for example, OK, I just put this bishop here just as an example, but it was actually played in the game. Very natural move. Black's bishop now improved. And just to show your point, Jovanka, on the board, if white ever pushes this pawn forward, which is actually quite a common idea from the Queen's Gambit, from a lot of other Queen's pawn openings, just to challenge black's stronghold, then the square you give away is this one. It's an eternal outpost for black, and black can very easily occupy that square in white's half of the board with his knight later on. And likewise for black. In the current position, if black, for example, ever does the same and pushes this pawn forward, then he gives away the square next door, and white controls this square for eternity. So, yeah, it's a bit of a weird standoff. I'm expecting to see this bishop move. Yeah, there we go, just to get the white king castled. And a lot of manoeuvring ahead.
But is that a goal in chess to control all the squares on the board, all 64 squares?
Then you get, well, you can't quite control all 64 squares, can you?
Maybe. It is, I think, technically legal to kind of have make 8 queens on the board. You could control all the lines, all the files, all the ranks.
I wonder if there's been a game between 2 grandmasters where every single square has been controlled. That's quite a weird question. Has there ever been a grandmaster game where one grandmaster has controlled every single square? You know, I mean, in a serious game, unlikely. It's unlikely, isn't it?
Right?
Maybe when there's a big imbalance between strengths, a very strong player against a very.
But can you guys, if you played me, can you imagine a way to control all the squares on the board? Is there?
I think you'd have to queen a lot of pawns. So if you can queen your pawns, get more queens, then you could do it that way probably. So,
but then the opponent would also control some squares too.
Just take all their pieces. Yeah. Just eliminate them. Just don't bother. Just take them off, and then you'll get there eventually, won't you? There's been some. Yeah, I mean, I've seen some of these challenges before where, you know, you have to checkmate with a certain pawn that you write down before the game and things like this, which is like.
Seen you do that successfully, Simon.
Yeah, I've done that once or twice on the stream, but it's quite fun, you know, to sort of, you know, give little challenges.
It's like a game of pool or billiards, what do you call it, when you have to name where you're gonna.
Yeah, put the black ball or
Exactly,
yeah, a bit similar to that. I mean,
that's a little bit easier maybe than naming which pawns you want to checkmate with.
But, you know, it wasn't quite squares, but I know that former world champion Bobby Fischer used to do this to people.
Oh.
You know, he'd be playing in tournaments and he'd be like, "I'm the youngest here, but you're the oldest. You're going to lose to me."
I mean, I remember playing in a team which was called the Drunken Knights Chess Club. Pretty good name, I think. It was quite a famous team in London, but we had one in my home village, and as well. And it's
strong in chess or in drinking?
Both.
Well,
equally strong in both.
The drinking game was very strong. The chess was okay, but we'd give ourselves challenges before the match. So we'd actually play in a pub, and we'd give ourselves little challenges like, you know, you can't move the queen, and the person who doesn't move the queen the longest, you still have to win the game. You know, we'd all put a little bit of money in the pot and do that. So it was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun doing this, and playing in a pub was just weird though. I remember we were playing there, and we were playing a very strong team. And this guy just opened the door. Chess? What are you lot doing playing chess? Stupid game. And he walked out. So it was like, yeah.
I remember the motto. It was, wasn't it, a drinking club with a chess problem?
That was it. Yeah.
I love it.
Drinking society.
Yeah, it was great. But it was so friendly, and you know, that's shows the other side to chess that you don't. You know, it's not all about professionals playing. You can enjoy it with your friends in a nice environment.
And it can be a very social game.
Very social game, so yeah.
I mean, there's no reason why it has to be so quiet, you know. Yeah. I mean, in Norway, I think they might still have it, but they used to have this kind of national NM, national championship in coffee chess, they called it. Oh. And the whole point was that you should be as social as you liked. You could talk to your opponent, you could troll your opponent, you could drink, and it was really different. I mean, I played in it once and I had a great time, but it was so strange to suddenly hear my opponent go, "Yeah, you're losing, aren't you?" I was like, what? Silence, please.
All right, well, we do have a few moves
on
the board.
The first pieces have left the board. So we did just see a knight trade, and I hesitate to call it the first critical moment of the game, but a bit of a timid decision from Tari, just to go back and, OK, White's king is now castled, but just to rewind a couple of moves. Here, White played knight takes knight, and I think if Tari was really, really feeling aggressive, he might have played pawn takes knight. This is maybe my first instinct, at least, because when the white knight now kicked away from its ideal post, when it retreats, black can start chipping away at the white centre. Look at these bishops. It's all about the tension here. Maybe white is OK, but the black bishop definitely putting pressure on. Instead of taking that risk, it is a bit of a risk since white now has targets. These double pawns aren't great. Instead of this, Aryan decided, OK, not going to imbalance the pawn structure. He takes with his bishop, and after white castles, he goes for the same plan, but maybe less effective. And remember, now this is eternally a outpost for white's pieces. Watch out for a white bishop, or maybe even a white knight later on in the game, landing on this square. And there's tension on this diagonal, as mentioned. Right now, white can't play pawn takes pawn because his bishop would be hanging along the diagonal. So it's a bit of a lock and key situation. Black can choose when to unlock this diagonal and trade off a set of pawns. In the meantime, it's not 100% clear what white does first.
I mean, this reminds me, I think it was yesterday, was saying Anish wrote about this game in New and Chess magazine, and he was saying that the bishop that's defended, fianchettoed, so we can highlight that one in front of the king, is always a little bit better than the bishop on the other side of the board, which is not defended, and I think that's the case here. White can't move the pawn in the centre, but somehow Black's got a little bit of better protection there. So that's, I guess, one advantage Black has in this position, this diagonal. But I agree that there's a lot of weakened squares as well that White has maybe control of.
Yeah, maybe this one. It's interesting that that's kind of Anish's rule, right? But then he's the one with the worst bishop in this scenario. So maybe he's feeling uncomfortable. He wants to have Black's bishop, and with that kind of discomfort that he's feeling, he pushes a pawn forward. Oh, that's an ugly move, blocking in his own bishop, but it was just the tension along this diagonal I think he was a bit too worried about. So, yeah, it's ugly putting a pawn on this square, but it's also very solid. You've kind of locked down everything. You're protecting your pawn in the centre twice. So, pros and cons there.
And maybe it's also saying to Black, hey, you can't put your knight where you want to put it, or turn the c6 square, because maybe after that move, you can just simply go pawn takes pawn. Yep. Get greedy.
Yeah, White can grab a pawn because now this diagonal is blocked. The white bishop, at least, is protected. So maybe a small kind of hint of a threat on the board, pawn takes pawn. I'm expecting Aryan just to defend that maybe with his queen. I'm not sure which square, this one, just to keep an eye on his pawn here. Yeah, early days, but whose position do we prefer?
Seems very equal to me at the moment. Yep. I mean, I would say it's too early to decide. Anish has just, gone into this position with this kind of middle game in mind. I would have thought, very boring. Am I allowed to say that? Manoeuvring, I'd say. I mean, it's not fireworks yet, but it will become more interesting.
Simon, you're 3 a.m. in the morning, and I've shaken you awake, and I say you have to choose white or black. Which one would you choose?
Black.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll go black. Only because I like playing with more space. But 3 o'clock in the morning and you're shaking me awake? Now, let me just think about that.
No.
Is your husband watching?
Okay. It was just, I wanted to put you on the spot.
I just putting you back on the spot there.
I get outmaneuvered by you, Simon, at every turn.
Let's move on quickly. I mean, I was going to say black because it feels like black has a little bit more space. Just a little bit, but I mean, there's not much in it, is there?
Here's another kind of angle for the same question in a way, but whose style do you think it suits more, Giri or Tari, this type of position?
I'd imagine Giri, right? Yeah, I mean, because Anish likes quite safe positions. I mean, generally. I mean, he can play... Well, people forget that Anish can play extremely aggressive as well. I mean, he had this reputation of being a draw master, but that was a bit unfair in a lot of respects. But
especially recent years.
Yeah, he's so exciting now. But I think Aryan prefers the dynamic game, so it's more... This is maybe not what Black would really want, but you're equal, so you can't complain too much either.
I have to say, I still, despite playing this type of opening with the white pieces, I'm still traumatised by those results. I actually like...
Sure, you're only traumatised by that.
Simon.
OK, back to the chess.
Yeah, so I was going to say that I really like Black's position just because it's easier to play. I mean, I really don't see what White's plan is.
Also, you mentioned, Simon mentioned earlier the Caro-Kann, and this pawn structure could easily arise from the Caro-Kann defence. It started as a queen's pawn opening, but this type of position, has massive similarities, especially in terms of pawn structure, to those positions that I think you've got some experience in, Jovanka, and I know that Aryan Tari played Caro-Kann yesterday against Anish. He's got experience in this type of pawn structure as well. Meanwhile, White's bishop, we mentioned he blocked in his own bishop, a bit of an ugly move. Now it's found a better diagonal.
And bishop's on the rim.
Yeah.
Are
They're okay. They're not. They're okay because the bishop is a long-range piece. They can even be on their starting squares and be incredible. So it's just the knights that need to be really in the centre. Or they need to have a specific purpose in mind if they're going to be placed in some unusual square.
The one thing you don't want with your bishops, though, you don't want to stare at your own pawns. So you want an open diagonal to look at, or you want to target one of your opponent's pawns or pieces, or you want to pin your opponent's knights, maybe. That's another kind of dream.
So
for
very
bishops.
sensible move then by Anish here.
Very good.
Yeah, I mean, with bishops, you're always looking to, and this is borrowing a Soviet phrase, you know, lengthen the diagonal. And you even do this when your opponent has put a pawn in your own bishop's way. You try to break that line, that diagonal apart. And, Aryan playing very sensibly, developing the queen.
I mean, these kind of games, they are much more, I did say the word boring, but you can learn a lot more, I think, from games like this than from big tactical battles. Because when you're watching, a big tactical battle, it's literally, you have to just find a tactic. But seeing how top players maneuver their pieces is, I think, a much more interesting way to improve your positional chess, because they move differently to most other players. So why are they playing those moves? What are their ideas? And Anish's idea of moving the pawn and the bishop, I wouldn't have seen that. I wouldn't have played that. So I think they're much better to learn from these types of games for manoeuvring battles. So they do have that benefit. I think.
It's like you can test your wits and just see how they kind of piece their pieces together. Piece their pieces. I didn't mean to say that, but that's what came out. But anyway, it's how they harmonise together and how he will try to find a point that he can put Aryan Tari or Aryan Tari to Anish. They will try to put their opponents under pressure. And this is a very tense battle so far. And whilst the players are deep in thought, well, we do have two competitions. I'm super excited about this. We have a quiz of the day, where we're asking what is your goal in chess. And we also have a selfie competition to win the good stuff, as Anish called it, a signed cushion and New in Chess magazine. And Honeybees, she's been very smart here, she's actually combined her answer to show a selfie and her goal. And she says that her goal is to promote her chess opening called the Bees opening, and a female and American invented opening, the Bee Defense.
Bee Defense.
Yes.
Oh, that's a cool name.
Yep, that is a cool goal as well, to have your own opening. Look forward to seeing what the Bee Defense is. And Ryan Baker, I think, is a Doctor Who fan. But it says, River Song and Daddy love our commentators and the great chess. And River Song, of course, is she the...
One of the... I have
What do you call them?
no idea.
The people who accompany the time. No, Amy Pond was the one.
I have no idea what's going on at the moment.
River Song was the daughter of Amy Pond. That's no spoilers, but
Yes, yeah.
Who
but
is
she
Amy?
was she was a love interest for one of the doctors on the show.
Yes.
Oh, Doctor Who. Okay.
Yeah,
right,
but it's a
okay.
great name, Ryan, and thank you for
Doctor
watching
Who?
the show.
Wait, who?
Did you say Doctor?
And okay. Meanwhile, Anish tries to get rid of Black's strong bishop in the centre of the board.
All right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Black's bishop has a choice. Simon, are you a bishop or knight man? Which piece is Black's bishop going to capture? Has a choice of two.
It obviously depends on the situation, and I think generally you'd take the bishop. I'm looking at ideas of taking the knight and then lunging with the pawn in the centre of the board, but I can't do that at the moment, and I have to be very careful making any committal decisions. So I'd probably take the bishop, or maybe I don't even need to take the bishop. Maybe I can play something else. Again, these are the kind of positions I have to admit I sometimes struggle with, because it's just finding a plan. And if you're not used to these positions, it's like, okay, it's much harder to automatically move your pieces to good squares. I mean, maybe I'd put a rook in the middle of the board if I wasn't sure what to do. Maybe I'd put that rook even behind the e-pawn, the other one in the middle. This is the kind of things I'd be thinking of, just waiting for something to happen. But it's not easy to know, for me, the right plans here for either side.
Yeah, so the reason you want to put your rook here is, as you mentioned, actually, is to explode open the centre, pushing this pawn 2 squares forward. There's 2 ways to play this. Either, for example, you trade off a bishop for a knight, and then you say, OK, I'm the only one with a knight now, so I'm just going to block up the centre. For example, you move your rook across. Next move, you just push your pawn. You just sit and lock things down.
He's done it.
OK, he's done exactly this, actually. Next move, as well as pushing this pawn 1 square, he could push it 2 squares. For example, I'm not even sure what white does here, to be honest. I'm assuming he moves one of his rooks, but then the pawn pushes, and this bishop is actually going to become the key piece. After a trade of pawns here, Black is doing fantastically well, hitting the bishop, hitting the queen, and actually targets as well in the white camp. So big, I think, strategic threat suddenly to push this pawn 2 squares, but Aryan has the choice. If he feels he's not ready, for example, if white makes a move, if he feels he's not ready to push the pawn 2 squares and commit, open things up for the white bishops, then he can just sit. And even this structure, from my experience with the Caro-Kann and similar openings, this is pretty decent for black as well, because actually, other than a potential kingside attack for white, which I know Simon would definitely go for, other than this, white lacks a plan. So here it would become very one-dimensional, and it would become all about whether white can attack, which takes a long, long time, actually. But that's, I think, the question in the current position. Is Aryan going to open things up, kind of make things spicy, put Giri under pressure by pushing a pawn 2 squares forward next move, or is he just going to take a slow strategic approach? It feels like Tari is the one with the kind of next card up his sleeve. And Anish knows that something's coming. He just has to be ready for it.
And how interesting that one pawn, moving it 2 squares or 1 square, is the big difference in the game.
Yeah, massive difference.
Wow.
And I have a feeling he's going to try and push it 2 squares just because he's slightly more dynamic, at least in instinct, Aryan Tari. But we'll see. Giri's slightly low on the clock as well. I don't think his opening experiment has been a success. I think, I wasn't sure earlier, but Jovanka might be right. This choice of opening...
Not the best.
Objectively not the most ambitious, but also stylistically just not suiting Giri. He definitely doesn't look comfortable at the moment.
All right. Well, all the quarterfinal matches, they are in game 1s, and this is a day with shotgun starts. So as soon as they finish their game, they will have 15 minutes until game 2 starts. So it's going to be chess going on at all times today. It's a very fun day in the Meltwater Champions Chess Tour. And the bar in all of the games, I mean, roughly to the center, but in the game 1 between Magnus Carlsen and David Anton, definitely looks like the world champion has an advantage with the white pieces.
Yeah, and Anish playing a preparatory move, I would say. It actually appealed to me, and it came to me when David was showing out his lines, you know, that after, should Aryan play the pawn break in the center, you know, there is something, if a knight appears on the e5 square, it would be on the same diagonal as the queen. So this kind of gives some possibility for the queen just to dodge the attack and step 1 move to the right.
Yeah, let's just show this.
We might see it.
He's gone for it.
Yep, so when the pawn steps forward after a trade, Anish's idea is to pin this black knight. sorry. Yeah, so it looks like this is about to happen. So the black knight doesn't have time to go and remove this white bishop, because if it does, then the black queen is actually loose and hanging. So it would drop off the board. So this is indeed the current position. Jovanka called it, and now I'm expecting this queen to either move or be defended. You can defend it with the black rook by bringing it across, defending the queen, or you can maybe move her and maybe eye up this pawn. This, however, can be blocked. Remember this key square that we talked about a while ago. It is eternally white's to occupy, and white can use his bishop, and because it's protected by a pawn, it's an outpost, and it does actually block out this black queen from the game.
It's quite risky, Aryan playing like this, positionally wise, because he's changed the pawn structure, Aryan, and he's changed it to the detriment of his position. His position structurally has become worse because of the pawn here highlighted in the middle. That cannot be defended by another pawn. I think we mentioned this, it's like, you know, pawny no mates, isn't it? This one, it hasn't got any of its mates next to it to defend it. So it's always going to be a target of pawny no mates in the middle.
It's the deep pawn, Simon. David no mates.
Oh, David always has mates, wherever David is. So it's, but it's quite risky, because if black doesn't keep the activity up, he's just made his structure worse, and he's opened up the bishops for white as well. So I don't know, Jovanka, I'm not sure I like it.
I agree with you totally there, Simon. I mean, it's like bad experiences all over again. So my terrible experiences, all from this white side of this particular opening, all came about when black simply waited. They waited in those type of positions with all the minor pieces on, and they just said, what you going to do? What you going to do when I come for you? And I was like, I don't know.
Do you have a music challenge, Jovanka, now?
No, it just came in my mind. You know, there's one thing about me, Kai, I'll let you in all in a secret. There's always some song, some theme tune happening in my mind. It's just
lyrics.
Yeah, I wake up in the morning and I have a tune in my head. And someone once said to me, I think it was your friend Oddbjörn, who said, maybe you should have been a musician in another life. And I'm like, well, maybe.
Yeah. Well, chess and music, there are comparisons to those. And the knight has moved.
Yeah, back where it came from, though. Aryan's queen now. I don't like the positioning of the black queen. We mentioned that the white bishop just kind of locks it out of the game. And the black knight, it sat on this square a few moves ago. I understand it's gone and done a job. It's went to capture a pawn. It's come back now, but it feels like it's time for white's rook, white's remaining rook next to his king, to just centralize, occupy an open line. I'm not really sure black's next move, unless black wants to push his pawn in the center of the board, but that also comes with risk. Black's isolated pawn, maybe it will push forward. Maybe that's Aryan's big plan, but yeah, the white bishop's looking pretty good now.
Yeah, I mean, playing this break that black's played, you should really have a plan in mind. And if the plan is just to remove pawns from the board and make your opponent's bishop stronger, it seems rather strange. And this could be like, you know, Aryan is the younger player. He's very good actively, but again, it could just be a sign of a weakness in his game. Maybe I'd have been very tempted to do the same. I probably would have done the same because I like active play, but it can often backfire. And I think maybe a bit of maturity there has just been shown that holding the position, I think, would have been a safer option at least here. I fear for black a little bit here in the long run.
And why is that? What is the main weakness in that black position?
Yeah, well, it's the pawn in the middle, so it's old Davy no mates or whatever he is, and in the middle, and there we go. So white is now lining up against that pawn. So that pawn is going to be under some pressure. You just can't defend it with another pawn, the way the structure is. And if you ever push that pawn forwards, which maybe we can show, you know, just if we simply take that pawn off, and let's say the knight comes in, the bishop moves to c4. You look at this position and suddenly, well, who's got the two bishops? White's got the two bishops, and bishops work in positions where there's no pawns because there's no pawns to block them in. I know the black knight is very strong at the moment, but in general rule is bishops are just very good in open positions, and that's the way this game is going, giving white some advantage, I feel, in the position. So this is where I just fear a little bit. We have another move, though, on
That does
on
not
board.
look good to me.
Yeah, this last move, knights on the rim are very dim normally. And I guess there's a specific idea. Yes, you're attacking this bishop. Oh, your instincts are right there, Kai. The computer hates this move as well. The evaluation bar hates this move. So the idea is you're attacking this white bishop, and, for example, if it runs away, because you want to keep your bishops intact, if it runs away somewhere, for example, then the black queen is open to go and capture a pawn.
Sorry, I've cheated.
Okay,
I just
Simon.
cheated. I don't normally cheat, but occasionally I do when I'm feeling lazy. So I'm having a little cheaty moment, and I've just looked at the computer, and there is a move here which is extremely strong for white, but maybe only one move, which will give white a very nice position.
My first instinct was maybe push this pawn forward, guard this bishop, but now you said there's something bigger. It must be to do with, okay, bring this bishop in, maybe?
You know, it doesn't take you long, David.
No, but I don't think I would have seen this, actually, if you hadn't given me that hint.
I saw it, but I just thought the rook moves to the left. And
Yeah, but I think guessing
found it.
he's played it. I think you can just take the pawn in the middle, maybe. Oh, then another pawn drops.
Yes, I forgot about that.
Maybe you can see this
C3,
pawn in the middle.
yeah.
It's complicated. For example, here, the black queen can also swing across. White has two undefended pieces. You have to be a bit careful. But what is the idea? Can white's bishops continue chasing the black rooks, maybe?
Maybe this is it. Maybe the other bishop comes in.
Look at this. Look at these bishops
wow.
now. We talked about long-range pieces, how they're fine on their starting squares. These bishops are anything but on their starting squares, controlling nearly every escape square for this black rook. This black rook only has one safe square, right?
Yeah, I mean, those bishops are actually fantastic, aren't they, with the rook? And this is kind of the danger we were mentioning, that you open up the bishops, they come to play.
And next move, maybe now you capture this weak pawn in the centre of the board and you defend your bishop in the process. What can black even move here?
It's good,
Take the
Jovanka,
queen.
doesn't it? So,
Sorry, he can take the pawn, is what I wanted to say.
Oh, okay. It
Take
gets
the-
complicated. Queen takes
Yeah.
pawn.
hello.
Your rook is hanging.
Yeah, I do.
White's rook is
White's
hanging.
rook is hanging.
There's rooks everywhere going on here. So.
I mean,
But
look at this.
maybe-
Queen takes rook, queen takes rook.
Yeah.
And it's been a trade. It's level material, but surely White's doing well with these three dominant pieces.
Should be good.
Actually, how many pieces are on the seventh row?
There's a fair
Sorry.
few there, aren't there? So, okay, but he didn't
Eight.
play it. He didn't play it. So he's played the more sort of obvious move, I'd say. But
Took this pawn.
that bishop move was looking really strong.
Yeah.
You found there, David. Actually, really good move.
So what's the answer? You know, should black swing the queen to the e6 square and attack the rook and the bishop?
Double attack. I guess it's his idea to bring his queen in and offer a trade here, maybe. it feels a bit loose. I don't like having this white king on a back rank with no escape squares. It feels like you've got to be really careful. For example, rook takes rook, and it looks like you're about to get checkmated. This would indeed be checkmate, but the white bishop can ride to the rescue. This bishop can slide back and block the check. So maybe it's just about okay for Anish Giri, and he still has these great pieces like bones in the throat for black, deep in the black camp. So it's probably still good, but I prefer keeping the bishops. And in the current position, there's actually options for Tari. He can also remove this bishop with his knight.
Your move looks a lot stronger, David, and I just keeping the bishops. And they actually control so many squares on those strange placements. So and you'd leave that black knight on that stupid square as well. Why allow black to exchange off that really weird knight there?
I think if Anish had more than 2.5 minutes, he probably would have played this move and kind of established these two monster bishops.
Are you a little bit worried for Anish's time?
Slightly, although the position is maybe turning in his favour. It's definitely black on the defensive here. I think Aryan, the onus is on him to try and equalise this game and try and hold.
And do you think now the key for Aryan is then to find a move that prevents Anish from moving that bishop to that fantastic square?
He has a few. He has a few options. You know, he has to first of all calculate the attacks and of course the captures. And I do quite like the knight takes bishop that you mentioned. And I don't know, it's such a fiery position.
It's got. This is the thing, isn't it, Ivanka? You get these kind of, I said it, boring opening, but nearly every boring opening they just come to life. So it doesn't really matter how you play the opening sometimes. I mean, exchange Frenches, you know, they're supposed to be the most boring opening ever, but they often become so tactical. And it's going the way that you mentioned here, David.
Yeah. That's the thing. If you've got two exciting players, give them a boring position, they'll liven it up. They'll find a way.
Definitely.
Exactly. And humanity rules.
And why did Anish take with his rook and not pawn here?
Good question. I think he wanted to firstly gain time. The white rook was attacking the black queen, so you kind of force your opponent's move. I think it's every chess player's instinct to make sure your opponent only has one logical option, or you don't want to give them 4 or 5 good options. Also, I guess if the white pawn had recaptured and stood where the white rook currently stands, then white would have double pawns on the b file. So it's strategic stuff.
And rook takes pawn for black is still in the air, right?
Big threat, actually.
It is big threat, right?
I mean, sorry, Ivanka. Yeah, I was thinking of queen e3. I just want to simplify. Maybe there's other moves here as well.
Try and get the queens off the board, because if you don't, I mean, for example, if you get greedy, your bishop's under fire. For example, if you take this black pawn, white is 2 pawns up temporarily, but we talked about the king a few moves ago, and as Ivanka mentioned, rook takes pawn is potentially on the board. It's very complicated, actually. White does have some counter checks against the black king, whose king is weaker. But the idea, for example, just to show, would be after rook takes rook, suddenly the white king is indeed trapped. Back rank checkmate, as we call it. So it's so complicated. Can white get away with taking this pawn? For example, rook takes pawn and meeting this move with a check, protected by its queen. Or is he going to take the safer option, as Simon mentioned? And I know which one I would choose if I didn't have much time on the clock. Giri now under 1 minute. I would definitely choose to try and trade queens, probably in this manner as well. Just get the queens off the board. White is temporarily 1 pawn up and another pawn about to fall. So getting the queens off the board, I think, is definitely the safest option. I'm still trying to calculate this one myself. Rook takes pawn, but I don't think Giri should waste too much more time thinking about a pawn grab. Don't be greedy when you have 30 seconds on your clock. Keep things safe. Get the queens off the board.
Yeah.
And that's his style as well. Oh, he drops his bishop back.
That should be good, right? It prevents any rook takes pawn or bishop takes pawn ideas.
Yep, it blocks this line for the black rook. Let's go back to the players, because it's really heating up. Giri on 38 seconds. 3 minutes down on the clock, but he has 1 extra pawn on the board. So Aryan's still on the board, at least. He's the one fighting for the draw.
And you also mentioned the white king. It doesn't have any luft, I guess.
Luft, no
Is that
breathing
still
space.
a problem? Does he need to move one of those pawns?
Yes.
Very good.
But
this is good stuff. On
We
fire
need-
today.
We need
So
to
good.
enter Kaya into a tournament, right?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
No. It would be like under 6.
I've had so many comments from people watching the show, and they say they're super impressed by your standard. Like, to begin with, they were like, we don't think Kaya knows too much.
Yeah.
And then suddenly every single show she gets better, you get better and better and better.
Yeah.
And now you're like, oh, back rank mate.
I think you could beat Magnus H6 or Magnus H7.
I have in the app. Yeah. I'm at like 8 years old.
Okay,
but I'm
8, yeah.
struggling on 8 years old.
Well, he was already good at 8 years old, Magnus. So,
It's a hard app, that one. So, yeah.
meanwhile, yeah, I think you're completely right, Kai. If Anish gets one move, if Tari does nothing here, wastes a move, then White's H pawn will just step forward 1 square, maybe 2 squares, give the White king an escape route. So that's why Tari has to do something quickly. He has to try and seize the moment, utilize the fact that the White king is a tactical weakness. And I don't see it, though, at the moment, I must confess. The White rook and White bishop on the 5th rank, they're pretty stable for now. It's hard to kick them away. And if you can't kick them away, how are Black's rooks getting into the game? Yeah, maybe the evaluation bar saying +1 for White. That means White does have a 1 safe extra pawn. And, OK, this rook lift is met by an offer of a queen trade. Very logical. Your idea, Simon, in play now.
Yeah, it looks pretty good for White, doesn't it? I mean, a safe pawn probably here.
All of White's pieces are well placed. And, OK, Aryan says, no, thank you, I'm not trading off queens. But now Kaya's idea comes into force. Look at that, the king has got some lift.
Yeah.
Feels nice.
Yes.
And as soon as that move is played, the evaluation bar shoots up for White. OK, it shoots back down slightly, but yeah, it's looking very one-sided right now. And when in doubt, push the H pawn.
Push Harry.
Push Harry.
Yeah.
Oh, we had this awesome entry into our quiz of the day. I have
About
to read
Harry?
it. It is about Harry.
Oh.
But I'll read it at a less
Critical
time.
Yeah, it is a critical moment. And we did see Black push a pawn 2 squares forward. And rather than the kind of allow the advance of Harry, White has done the same. White has just locked down the whole king side now. No real pawn breaks on this right half of the board. Play will switch back to the other flank. Oh, I'm trying to stifle a sneeze.
Yep.
Oh dear.
Tongue.
Yep. Thanks, guys.
I
That was
never
nearly a very
forget that.
embarrassing moment.
We had that tweet like a year ago. Someone saying, if you want to stifle a sneeze, then you put your tongue all the way up in your...
Really? In
Yeah.
your mouth? Oh, right.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think I'm just so full of nervous tension watching the game.
Yeah. And the bar now, it definitely goes up for Anish after this move by Aryan.
Yeah, I understand what Aryan is trying to do. He's trying to put pressure on White's bishop. He's trying to kick away the White bishop because then the Black rooks will be great. But I don't really see the immediate threat. Maybe he wants to push a pawn to kick away this White bishop even.
Under 20 seconds, though. I mean, this is the one hope that Aryan's got, that Anish is very short time and the queens are still on the board, making it more
How
complex.
did he make that move? His hands were on his head.
Oh!
Oh, wow.
Levitation.
Yeah.
What?
Wait, he did this yesterday as well. He
It
is
wasn't a pre-move. It took a while.
the
Yeah.
Jedi Master. Actually, I want to see that again. what other parts of his body could he be using?
Maybe his young son came in and just kind of went rogue on the mouse.
Don't look at me like that. I'm sorry. No, don't, oh dear. Get that image out. Yeah, so back to the game.
What?
Pushing a
It
pawn.
must have been a pre-move, but maybe technical stuff was a little late.
Maybe there was a lag, or maybe his webcam froze just for a few seconds.
think
Maybe.
so, yeah.
That's true.
Yeah.
That's the only explanation I can come up with. Will it happen again? Okay, his hands are on his head. He's
Yep.
got under 20 seconds. Let's all watch Anish Giri. And he did it again.
What?
That wasn't a pre-move.
That's twice in a row, isn't it? I don't.
That's not a pre-move.
That's not a pre-move
No,
because
'cause he-
Black could have played anything and this was not a safe pre-move.
How's he doing this?
How is this
the magician?
He's a Jedi.
He is clearly the Jedi. Yeah. He's like,
Maybe
you know,
Use the force,
Maybe it's
Anish.
voice activated. He could be just like rook F1.
telekinetic kind of
He's-
magic.
Wouldn't that be kind
yeah.
of like cheat? I mean, the mouse skill, that's very important, right?
Yeah,
You need
exactly.
to actually use the mouse.
Yeah, and it probably wouldn't be a good idea.
Must be the webcam freezing.
No. The hand's down.
Maybe there's just a delay with the camera. I mean, I think that's the
That is
most logical.
very strange, though.
Yeah.
And Aryan down to 40 seconds on the clock. But I have to say, Anish's move was slightly mysterious to me.
Yeah, I think
It's safety first. I think it's good kind of speed chess tactics, kind of good strategy. When you're low on the clock, just protect everything. White's rook now on a safe square. And Anish, Aryan there, he was just kind of gesturing. Is that a mouse slip? That must be a mouse slip. He was shaking his head.
really. Was there?
I don't know what Black's rook move was doing. Simply, Black's rook on a terrible square now, and
Yeah.
Yeah.
Might be
queen
a
trade
nice
would
flip.
end the game almost.
Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
sure he was going to move that rook and attack the queen. But now Anish has offered a queen trade, and it's quite a powerful move, actually, because you're going to have to... You're forced
Tari
to
down
take
to
it.
2 seconds. Oh, he made that move with a few seconds left, and queen's coming off the board. That is going to signal the end now.
And another pawn is going to drop, actually, after queen takes queen. Oh, no, you don't have to...
Well, maybe you can take the pawn.
You can take the
Maybe
pawn.
You can just grab it, yeah.
There we go. 2 pawns up now for Anish Giri.
Yeah.
It's just a mopping up job now. He just needs to keep everything nice and safe and protected. He has no weaknesses, though, Giri. Nothing for Tari to attack.
Yeah.
Yeah, the white bishop drops back. Look how everything is protected in white's camp. Literally every single pawn, every single piece protected.
Maybe his strategy just worked perfectly in this game. I mean, you know, he wasn't going for an opening advantage. He was basically thinking, I'm going to wait until Aryan does something. And as soon as he did something, the position just got worse and worse, didn't it? So it kind of worked perfectly.
Obviously, they've worked together. They know each other well. So Anish is, like you say, psychologically outwitting Aryan and saying, hey,
Yeah.
I know that you have a tendency to be impatient and to want to do things. And, OK, Aryan simply retreating the bishop. It's difficult to suggest a move, actually, for him. He just has to wait and see what Anish comes up with.
Black's pieces aren't even active. So when you're 2 pawns down in an endgame, sometimes you get compensation by throwing your pieces forward, attacking weaknesses, forcing your opponent on the defensive, but that's not even the case here. Tari is 2 clear pawns down, and if all the rooks come off the board, game over. If white's pawns push forward, game over. Tari, out of ideas, and it's just all about Anish's experience. He used it really well in those critical moments, when to trade queens off, when to defend everything, and I think this is a model game, actually, how to handle complicated positions when you're low on time. He did it perfectly.
There's no tricks here either. I mean, this is the only thing that Black could try to do, something on the king's side, you know, but I love what White's doing here, swapping pieces off. When you're 2 pawns up, try to swap things off, and this is why Black's kept the rook on the board, going for a potential pawn push to create some openings in the position, but it's not really going to work.
Yeah, unfortunately.
Even maybe rook
takes bishop here.
Yeah, swap some more pieces off.
Win in style, Simon.
Yeah.
That was a nice tactic.
Yeah,
and we say, okay, it has happened. White has given up a rook for a bishop, but White's bishop is going to enter the centre of the board. If the black rook moves away, White's rook actually goes to the corner and checkmates the black king. And there we go. I think Aryan Tari, he has resigned, about to lose even more material.
It's over. And just...